Protesters say they are standing against what they call, quote, political and police corruption. We spoke to one who said she hopes that the group continues to grow.
The group gets bigger, obviously, and I hope they start weeding out these corrupt police, judges, DAs, all of it.
From the outside, it might look like just another fallen rapper heading back to court. But with Young Buck, what we are really watching in April 2025 is the slow public collapse of a whole legacy. His latest arrest in Sumner County is not a random headline. It is the moment years of legal trouble, financial ruin, and a brutal feud finally lock into place, with a real chance that this time he does not walk away. When officials confirmed that he had violated his bond supervision at least 6 different times, tied to that 2020 case involving domestic allegations, vandalism, and a weapon charge, the judge's response was blunt. 30 days behind bars now, and a new bond and full trial still waiting on the other side. For a man who once stood next to 50 Cent, Eminem, and Dr. Dre on the biggest stages in music, we are suddenly talking about whether he spends a long stretch in a Tennessee cell.
Now, after repeated violations of his bond supervision, Tennessee native and straight outta Cashville rapper Young Buck now has to serve time.
So Sumner County officials say there was a hearing earlier this week to revoke bond for David Darnell Brown.
The conditions he broke were not complicated. Since securing his release in 2020 on a $60,000 bond, Buck was ordered to check in with his bond supervisor twice a month while under GPS monitoring for both a domestic case and a separate substance-related case. Prosecutors say he simply stopped showing up. By April 7, 2025, the district attorney's office had enough and pushed for a hearing. And that same day, he was booked into the county jail to begin his 30-day sentence. At the very moment his supporters hoped the 2020 incident would finally move toward resolution, his trial date was first set for July 24th, then pushed all the way back to January 12, 2026, leaving him in a kind of legal limbo that could easily end with a conviction measured in decades, not months. When we look at that timeline side by side with his past record, the pattern is hard to ignore. Outside the courthouse in Sumner County, the story looked very different depending on which side of the barricade people were standing. Local news cameras caught protesters gathering on the courthouse steps, holding signs, and telling reporters they believed Young Buck was the real victim in the 2020 altercation, pointing out that his former partner was also charged with reckless endangerment after allegedly firing a weapon in his direction. One organizer went on record saying that Buck was a provider trying to leave a toxic situation, and that the system was punishing him instead of protecting him. Inside, though, officials focused on his missed appointments and his history of probation issues dating back to the Vibe Awards case, and later threats tied to another former partner. In that contrast between fans calling him a father and role model, and the state calling him a repeat violator, we can see the split that has been following him since the late 2000s.
Today, protesters spoke out against straight out of Cashville rapper Young Buck being ordered to serve time. David Darnell Brown, known as Young Buck, was sentenced to serve time for repeated violations of his bond supervision. Officials say Brown was ordered to serve 30 days in Sumner County Jail after his bond.
Meanwhile, the social media response turned his latest mugshot into a spectacle within hours. 50 Cent, who has made a second career out of mocking former allies online, reposted the booking photo to his millions of followers and added a caption about the shape of Buck's head, suggesting officers must have hit him before the picture was taken. This was not a one-off joke. It echoed earlier posts where he used the same image alongside clips of cartoon characters known for exaggerated features, all to underline that his former G-Unit partner was back in trouble again. For viewers who remember the days when Buck's name sat next to platinum plaques and sold-out tours, seeing that image placed next to cheap memes underlines how far the power dynamic has shifted. The legal danger is only one part of the collapse. By the time he walked back into a cell in April 2025, the financial foundation under Young Buck's career had already been gutted in a way that most artists only read about in cautionary essays. In 2023, after a long and very public bankruptcy battle, court documents showed he had been forced into a full liquidation, roughly $1.05 million in assets, from his music catalog and studio gear to cars and jewelry, all stacked into a pile to be converted into cash. Out of that, about $445,000 reportedly went straight into legal fees, leaving around $600,000 to divide among creditors who had lined up over unpaid taxes, old business disputes, and one very personal claim from a former boss who never misses a chance to twist the knife.
You know, I was given 30 days for basically being absent, not showing up on time and stuff like that, while being out on bond type of situation. So, you know, I be kind of trying to figure it out, because in the beginning it was more like being a big fish in a small pond.
At the center of that bankruptcy ledger was a number that fans of both artists instantly recognized as symbolic. $200,006.90, owed to 50 Cent after a court sided with his version of a disputed $250,000 payment. 50 called it a personal loan that was never repaid. Young Buck, through his team, insisted it was an advance tied to a recording deal, and at one point even suggested there was no proof the money had ever hit his hands. In the end, the judge did not buy that argument. The settlement forced Buck to accept responsibility for just over $200,000, and that amount became one of the main reasons his catalog and possessions were pushed onto the auction block. It is hard to frame that outcome as simple mismanagement when the winning creditor is the same man who has been laughing at his mugshots and hinting at behind-the-scenes control for more than a decade. This is where the whispers of sabotage start to sound less like fan fiction and more like a logical question. Industry sources looking at the timing point out that bankruptcy did not just erase Buck's debts, it also finally pried him out of an old contract that had limited his ability to release albums for years. The same arrangement he publicly blamed for forcing him into the mixtape grind in 2009 and 2010. The fact that G-Unit Records once filed a $10 million lawsuit against him, and that the eventual bankruptcy still left him owing 50 well into the 2020s, has led some insiders to ask whether his financial destruction was simply the end result of bad decisions, or part of a longer power play by a more successful rival. No one on 50's team has admitted to any deliberate campaign beyond collecting what the court says he is owed. But when the same figure control online and enforce contracts in the same breath, it is easy for viewers to believe there is more strategy here than meets the eye.
My strong point with the crew, you know what I'm saying? I've always loved the music more than the money. It might sound crazy to some of y'all, but that's the truth, because I wasn't making no money from music in the beginning. I fell in love with just the music, and that's what I maintained my love for. The money.
At the same time, we cannot pretend this all came out of nowhere. When we rewind to 2014, there was a brief window where it looked like Young Buck had pulled off one of the rarest moves in hip-hop, a genuine comeback under the same banner that once pushed him out. The G-Unit reunion at Hot 97 Summer Jam on June 1st, 2014, brought him back on stage with 50 Cent, Lloyd Banks, and Tony Yayo. And in the months that followed, they dropped The Beauty of Independence and The Beast is G-Unit, with Buck's voice and energy all over both projects. Fans heard the same raw delivery from the Straight Outta Cashville era, now filtered through prison time, IRS raids, and a federal weapons sentence. And for a moment, the narrative shifted from tragedy to redemption. He even began an ambitious series of mixtapes branded around the number 10, signaling that he still believed in long-term planning. But even during that reunion phase, the relationship with 50 never really left the danger zone. Old accusations about missed tax payments, alleged substance issues, and loyalty conflicts with Shaw Money XL lingered in interviews and social media posts. By 2018, when Buck was promoting new music and hinting at an album supposedly connected to both 50 and Dr. Dre, the piece started to crack again. Legal filings resurfaced around unpaid obligations, and 50 once more claimed that any move Buck tried to make in the market had to go through him first. For an artist trying to rebuild after an 18-month federal stretch and earlier community service tied to the Vibe Awards case, the idea that a former mentor could still block projects in the late 2010s and early 2020s only made the sabotage narrative feel more plausible to people watching from the sidelines.
He doing with his life, 50 doing whatever he doing with his life, and it is what it is, you know what I'm saying? But I went down that road of trying to get us back together and getting back together and all of that, you know.
Then there were the personal jabs that went way beyond money. In 2019, when leaked audio involving Buck and a trans person spread online, 50 turned what could have been a private crisis into open season, posting homophobic captions and framing the whole situation as proof that Buck had betrayed him. The feud escalated again in early 2025, when Buck appeared in a clip sending respect to Big Meech after his release and telling critics to stop playing with the former Kingpin's name. 50 responded publicly by mocking Buck's orientation again, writing, "This fool fell out with me because he liked boys," and adding that he never told him to go loving on a tranny he couldn't resist, turning long-running rumors into a weapon, just as the legal system was tightening its grip. For people paying attention, it looked less like a simple personality clash and more like a sustained effort to keep Buck's image tied to scandal instead of music. That final insult in 2025 did more than just spark a few headlines. it landed right on top of the legal and financial disasters already in motion. While Buck's supporters were outside the courthouse insisting he was the target of a biased system and highlighting that his former partner in the 2020 case had also faced charges, 50's comments online helped ensure that any potential brand partners, promoters, or collaborators saw him as radioactive. Even as Buck tried to present himself on social platforms as focused and grateful, celebrating milestones like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville and hinting at new work, the combination of an upcoming 2026 trial, open debts from a bankruptcy he barely survived, and a relentless public campaign from a more powerful rival turned his path forward into a minefield. And as we move closer to that January court date, the real question hanging over everything is no longer just how much time he might serve, but whether there is any version of the future where young Buck walks back into a studio as a truly free man again.
So it's like now I'm in a place where it's like, you know, ain't no sense of talking about it. Let me just show you, you know what I mean? So, you know, you can just expect a lot of new music, a lot of new movement. This the first time I even sit in front of a camera doing an interview in a long time, man, you know what I'm saying?
And as that trial date creeps closer on the calendar, the whole tone around this case starts to shift from simple crisis into something that feels a lot more calculated. Prosecutors in Sumner County did not just agree to push things back to January 12, 2026, because everyone's schedule was full. Legal insiders point out that when a jury trial tied to a 2020 incident gets delayed more than once, it usually means the state is quietly stacking witnesses, documents, and prior incidents behind the scenes. They now have bond logs showing missed meetings in 2024 and early 2025, GPS records tracking where he went when he was supposed to be checking in, and a paper trail linking those violations back to the same man who already has a 2012 conviction on his record for possession of a weapon as a convicted felon. From their angle, every missed appointment is another brick in a wall they want to build around the phrase repeat offender. We can see how they intend to frame it. Not as one messy night in 2020 that spiraled out of control, but as the latest stop in a long pattern that started with the Vibe Awards case in 2004 and got formalized with that 18-month federal stretch in 2012. Prosecutors can point to his 2016 arrest over threats involving an ex, his 2022 vandalism case where officers said he kicked in a car, and now the bond violations tied to both a domestic case and a substances case, as proof that supervision, warnings, and prior sentences never really changed his behavior. One former county attorney looking at this kind of file called it the snowball method, where the state lets small violations accumulate until they can walk into court and tell the jury, this is not a one-time lapse, but a lifestyle that never stopped. By the time January 2026 arrives, they are likely to have every old misstep cleaned up and ready to replay in front of 12 strangers. To make matters worse, that snowball is rolling through an environment that already sees him as unstable. When officials in 2025 described his bond breaches as repeated and emphasized that a judge had to revoke his freedom just to bring him back under control, they were sending a message that this is someone who does not respect court orders. A juror who hears that, then learns about a past federal sentence linked to a weapon, may not separate one decade from another. Add in the fact that his 2020 arrest involved allegations inside his own home and a firearm in the mix, and it becomes very easy for a prosecutor to stand up and say, this person has been given chance after chance and still chose the same chaos. Whether or not that is the full story, that is the narrative they are clearly gearing up to sell.
Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, once as an artist, once you give it to the people and give it to the streets, you know, they gonna make it, they gonna let you know what you're dealing with. So I'm definitely about to shoot the first video off of that project, Do Better. And you know, like I say, if you ain't heard it, make sure you get out there and go stream me, buy me, download me.
Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, another narrative has been built brick by brick for almost 20 years, and it has 50 Cent's fingerprints all over it. When we go back to that reunion window in 2014, we remember a different energy entirely. G-Unit back on stage, 2 new EP projects, Buck yelling on the phone about being blessed and relevant again, smiling in interviews and pouring drinks and videos as if the fights and IRS raids were finally over. Fast forward to April 2025, and that same man's new mugshot is being cropped, reposted, and turned into a joke for millions of followers, with 50 clowning his hairline and implying that officers roughed him up. It is not the first time either. Every big low point since 2019 seems to come with a new caption, a fresh meme, a sarcastic reminder that he still owes money. Those online jabs might look like routine trolling, but when you put them next to the courtroom timeline, they start to feel like part of a much colder strategy. Remember, this is the same 50 Cent who walked out of a long bankruptcy fight in 2023, holding a legal victory worth just over $200,000, backed by a judge's signature that said his version of the disputed $250,000 payment was the truth that counts. The same man who claimed in interviews and books that he had already bailed Buck out of tax problems before painted him as financially reckless, then watched as bankruptcy forced the liquidation of more than $1 million in assets, including the very catalog that once helped build the G-Unit brand. When that kind of financial power intersects with a public campaign of humiliation, we have to ask whether this is just pettiness or something more tactical.
Yeah, man, it's like I said, I got a lot of music out. I think a lot of the things that I've been through and going through in life has played a part in regards to people actually really paying close attention and realizing I've been him.
Industry veterans who have seen similar fallouts describe this as psychological warfare, played out in the open. One former road manager from another camp told colleagues that every time Buck's name trends for legal trouble, 50's posts act like a free negative PR blast that reaches way beyond Tennessee. Potential jurors, venue owners, and even local officials use the same social platforms. They scroll past a mugshot and a mocking caption long before they ever see a court filing. So when 50 replays old rumors about Buck's private life in early 2025, just as protests are forming outside the Sumner County Courthouse and reporters are explaining that his trial is coming, it is not crazy to think those words are doing more than just scoring internet points. We also cannot forget the deeper history behind that mockery. This is the same relationship that cracked open in 2008 with a taped phone call where Buck was heard crying, apologizing, and begging for guidance, then got dragged further through the mud when 50 alleged substance issues on the radio and claimed he had paid taxes more than once. In 2019, when private audio involving Buck and a trans person went public, 50 did not just keep his distance, he weaponized it, with a line about Buck falling out with him because he liked boys, and a comment about him going after someone he couldn't resist. In 2025, when Buck sent love to Big Meech and told people to stop playing with his name, 50 went right back to that same wound, repeating the insinuations and turning his former artist's personal life into a punchline again.
After we had met 50 and he had, made the record with him up here or whatnot, we left New York and went across the country to California. And going across the country to California, we was going on Suge Knight's time, which I didn't have full recognition or full knowledge of what was going on because Juvenile was the one who was spearheading the bit.
And hovering over all of this is one chilling possibility that no one around him can ignore. If the jury in 2026 decides that the pattern the prosecutors are selling is real, we could be looking at a sentence that takes him off the board for a long time, at an age where comebacks are rare. A former label executive has already told colleagues that for some in the business, this case is effectively the final chapter. They have moved on to new talent, new trends, and new alliances with the man who once shouted that Buck's career was finished. So when we hear that the only person who seems to consistently profit from each new low point is the same figure cashing court-ordered checks and cracking jokes online, we have to ask, is young Buck walking into a fair fight in 2026, or into a stage-managed finale where the verdict was written in memes years ago? Let us know what you think in the comments, because this story is far from over, and until the gavel finally hits, we will be right here watching how it all plays out. Stay safe, stay alert, and we will catch you in the next one.